Warren Buffett stood in front of Congress in 2011 and said three words that should have destroyed everything. The system is rigged. Not broken, not unfair, rigged. And this wasn't some whistleblower or activist. This was the third richest man in America, worth $50 billion, admitting that he pays 17% tax while his secretary pays 35%. And the shocking part isn't that this happens. The shocking part is that it's completely legal. It's exactly how the system was designed to work. And nobody did anything about it because the people who benefit from the rigging are the same people who write the rules. You need to understand what Buffett actually confessed to that day, because it's not just about billionaires avoiding taxes. It's about a wealth transfer machine so sophisticated that it's been running for 50 years, extracting money from your paycheck and depositing it into accounts you'll never see. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how they're doing it to you right now. Debbie Bosanek was Warren Buffett's secretary, earning around $60,000 a year. And when you added up her income tax and payroll tax and everything else the government took from her paycheck, she paid about 35% of everything she earned, while Buffett, earning billions from his investments, paid 17%, which means the woman answering phones paid double the rate of a man worth $50 billion. And this wasn't because Buffett hired expensive accountants to cheat the system. This was the system working perfectly because the tax code has two completely different sets of rules. One for people who work for money and another for people whose money works for them. If you earn a salary, you pay income tax up to 37% plus payroll tax plus state tax. But if you earn the same amount from investments, you pay capital gains tax at 20 or 23.8% maximum. And the richer you are, the more of your income comes from investments rather than salary, which means the richer you are, the lower your effective tax rate. And this inversion where billionaires pay less than secretaries isn't a bug. It's the core feature of a system designed by the wealthy to benefit the wealthy. But here's what makes this truly insidious. Buffett didn't just point out this injustice and move on. He wrote an op-ed in the New York Times titled "Stop Coddling the Subech," where he begged Congress to raise his taxes. He said wealthy Americans like himself weren't paying enough, that the tax code had been systematically tilted in their favor for decades, and that this concentration of wealth at the top would eventually destabilize society. And you might think that when one of history's most successful investors says tax me more, Congress would listen. But instead, conservatives called him a hypocrite who should just write a check to the Treasury if he wanted to pay more. Progressives praised him, but couldn't actually change anything. And the lobbying groups funded by billionaires spent $300 million that year alone to ensure the tax code stayed exactly as rigged as Buffett said it was. 15 years later, nothing has changed. Buffett still pays 17%. His secretary still pays 35%, and you're still paying more than billionaires while being told you need to sacrifice more. And the question you need to ask is, why would Buffett admit this? Why would a billionaire expose the rigged system that made him rich? And the answer is going to disturb you. Now let me show you exactly how the scam works, because once you see the mechanism, you'll recognize it everywhere. Before 1980, investment income was taxed almost the same as wage income, sometimes at rates as high as 40%, because the logic was simple. Income is income, regardless of whether you earned it by working or by owning things. But then Reagan came along with trickle-down economics, claiming that if we just gave rich people more money by cutting their taxes, they would invest it and create jobs and everyone would prosper. So capital gains rates got slashed from 40% to 28%. Then Clinton cut them again to 20%. And now they're at 20 or 23.8%, while wage income is taxed up to 37%. They told you this would grow the economy and raise wages. But here's what actually happened between 1940 and 1980 when the rich paid higher taxes. Median wages doubled, people could buy houses on single incomes, and the economy grew faster than any period since. But after 1980, when we slashed taxes on the wealthy, wages stagnated for 40 years. Wealth inequality exploded to levels not seen since the 1920s. And all that promised growth went straight to the top 1% who paid lower taxes than ever before. The capital gains preference is just the opening move, because the tax code is filled with weapons that only the wealthy can use. There's the carried interest loophole that lets hedge fund managers treat their billion-dollar fees as investment income taxed at 20% instead of wages taxed at 37%. There's the step-up in basis rule that completely eliminates capital gains tax on assets passed to heirs, which costs the government $40 billion a year. There's the ability to deduct investment losses against other income while gains get taxed at preferential rates. And when you combine all these advantages, you get a situation where someone like Buffett, who earns billions through capital gains and dividends, pays 17% effective rate, while his secretary earning $60,000 in wages pays 35% with no sophisticated strategies available to reduce her burden. Each of these provisions sounds technical and boring, which is exactly why they survive, because complexity is camouflage. If you make the rules complicated enough, most people won't understand how thoroughly the game is rigged against them. And that's not an accident. That's the explicit strategy of the people who designed this system. What would you do if I told you that every single day you go to work, the government takes a bigger cut of your paycheck than it takes from billionaires, not because you earn more, but because the system was deliberately built to extract maximum revenue from workers while minimizing taxes on wealth? This is what Buffett admitted. This is what he called rigged. And the reason it continues is that the same people who benefit from these rules spend hundreds of millions on lobbying and campaign contributions to ensure they never change. And both political parties take the money because the system isn't Democrat versus Republican. It's the wealthy versus everyone else. And the wealthy have been winning for 50 years while convincing you that your real enemies are immigrants or welfare recipients or the other political party. Buffett's confession forces you to confront an uncomfortable truth. We don't live in a meritocracy where hard work determines success. We live in a system designed to protect and compound existing wealth while making it nearly impossible for working people to accumulate assets that might threaten the position of those at the top. If you're feeling anger build as you realize you've been paying more than billionaires while being told the wealthy carry an unfair burden, stay with me, because what comes next will show you the mechanisms they use to keep you from ever catching up. And understanding these weapons is the only way to protect yourself from them. Subscribe now, because very few people are willing to explain this as directly as I'm about to. Here's what the defenders of this system always say: that lower capital gains taxes encourage investment, which creates jobs and grows the economy. But this is propaganda, and the evidence proves it. Countries like Denmark and Germany tax capital gains at the same rate as wages, and they have strong economies with less inequality. The American economy grew faster between 1940 and 1980, when capital gains were taxed higher than it has since we cut rates. And the promised job creation never materialized because wealthy people don't create jobs by having lower taxes. They create jobs when there's demand for products. Unservices. And you can't have demand when workers' wages have been stagnant for 40 years, while all the gains go to people who already have more money than they can spend. The real reason for low capital gains taxes isn't economic growth. It's wealth preservation. It's ensuring that people who already have assets can compound their wealth across generations, while people who work for money pay the highest rates and struggle to save enough to even start investing. Let me show you how this compounds across generations, because this is where the system becomes truly obscene. Not only do the wealthy pay lower rates on their income, they also benefit from estate planning that allows them to pass billions to their children while paying minimal tax. The step up in basis rule means that if Buffett bought stock for $1 million and it's worth $1 billion when he dies, his heirs get the stock valued at $1 billion with zero capital gains tax owed on the $999 million in appreciation. The gain simply disappears from the tax system forever. And when you combine this with trusts and family offices and charitable foundations that provide tax deductions while maintaining family control, you create a system where dynastic wealth grows across generations. Largely tax-free while working, people pay the maximum rate and can barely afford to leave anything to their children. This is why 400 families in America have more wealth than one. 150 million Americans combined, not because they're 400 times smarter or work 400 times harder, but because the tax code is explicitly designed to concentrate wealth at the top and keep it there. Now, here's the part that should make you furious. After Buffett's confession, after he wrote op-eds and gave interviews and testified to Congress that the system was rigged, exactly nothing changed. Capital gains rates stayed low, the estate tax stayed weak, they carried interest loophole survived, and wealth inequality got worse every single year because the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as the people who designed it intended. Conservative politicians claimed raising taxes on the wealthy would hurt growth, even though all evidence shows the opposite. Progressive politicians talked about reform but took money from the same wealthy donors and never actually changed the rules. And Buffett himself, despite calling for higher taxes, structured his entire estate to minimize tax through his foundation, which reveals something crucial about how this game works. The wealthy can afford to advocate for higher taxes because they know the loopholes and trusts and foundations they use will protect them anyway. It's performance, It's controlled opposition. It's saying the right things while ensuring nothing fundamentally changes. And 15 years after his confession, Buffett still pays 17%, his secretary still pays 35%, and you still pay more than billionaires. But here's what Buffett didn't say in that congressional hearing. Here's the part that makes his admission look almost innocent by comparison. The tax code is just one mechanism of wealth extraction. It's actually not even the most important one anymore, because while you were focused on tax rates, something much bigger was happening with the Federal Reserve and the banking system that makes tax avoidance look like pocket change. Since 2008, the Fed has created over $20 trillion out of nothing through quantitative easing and other programs, and that money didn't go to you. It went to banks and asset owners who used it to buy stocks and real estate and bonds, which inflated asset prices to insane levels while your wages stayed flat. And this is why someone who bought a house in 2000 can now sell it for triple what they paid, while someone trying to buy today needs 2 incomes and can barely afford a down payment. This isn't market forces. This is deliberate policy. This is the Fed creating money that flows to people who already own assets while doing nothing for people who live on wages. And the result is the largest wealth transfer in human history happening right now, while economists tell you inflation is transitory and everything is fine. The genius of what Buffett did was to get everyone focused on tax rates, to admit the system was rigged in a way that sounded shocking but actually obscured the deeper mechanisms of wealth extraction. Because as long as you're angry about billionaires paying 17% instead of 37%, you're not asking why the Fed creates trillions that go to asset owners. You're not asking why wages haven't kept pace with productivity in 50 years. You're not asking why housing costs 6 times what it did relative to income. You're not connecting the dots between monetary policy and tax policy and regulatory capture to see the complete picture of how wealth is systematically transferred from working people to financial elites. Buffett could afford to admit the tax system is rigged because taxes are the distraction. The real theft is happening at the Federal Reserve, where money creation benefits whoever owns assets first, and you weren't supposed to notice that part. Think about what this means for your life right now. You work 40 or 50 hours a week, you pay 30 or 35% of your income in taxes, you try to save for retirement by putting money in a 401k that might return 7% a year if you're lucky. And meanwhile, people like Buffett pay 17% tax on billions earned through investments. They have access to private equity and hedge funds that return 15 or 20%. They benefit from Fed policy that inflates the assets they already own. And when they die, they pass it all to their children with minimal tax through structures you'll never have access to. The system isn't designed to let you catch up. It's designed to ensure you never threaten the position of people at the top. And every mechanism from the tax code to monetary policy to financial regulation works together to maintain this hierarchy. And the reason Buffett could admit it's rigged is because admission without action is just another form of control. It lets you feel like someone powerful agrees with you while ensuring nothing changes. So what do you do with this knowledge? How do you protect yourself in a system explicitly designed to extract wealth from workers and concentrate it among asset owners? First, you stop believing the lie that hard work alone will make you wealthy. Because in a rigged system, following the approved path just ensures you stay in your lane, paying maximum taxes while accumulating minimal wealth. Second, you understand that the only way to build wealth in this system is to become an asset owner as quickly as possible. Because the tax code and monetary policy reward ownership, not labor, which means you need to prioritize buying assets even if it means living below your means for years. Because every year you delay is another year of wealth flowing to people who already own while you pay the highest rates on wages. Third, you recognize that political change is unlikely as long as both parties depend on wealthy donors, which means individual action and education are more important than voting for politicians who promise reform but never deliver. But here's the hard truth that you need to hear. The system Buffett admitted was rigged has gotten more rigged every year since his confession, and it will continue getting worse because the people who benefit have all the power and the people who are harmed are too divided and distracted to organize effectively. The wealth gap will keep widening, asset prices will keep inflating, wages will keep stagnating, and your children will have even less opportunity than you did unless something fundamental changes. And that change isn't coming from billionaires admitting the system is rigged or politicians promising reform or experts explaining the problem. It's only going to come from enough people understanding how the game works and refusing to play by rules designed to keep them losing. Buffett told you the truth in 2011. The system is rigged, and nothing has changed because admission isn't action, confession isn't reform, and the people who benefit from the Rigging will never voluntarily give up their advantages. Here's what happens next. Here's the information they really don't want you to have. In 1913, a group of bankers met in secret on Jekyll Island and created the Federal Reserve, which gave private banks the power to create money and lend it to the government at interest. And this was the foundation of the wealth extraction system that Buffett's confession only scratched the surface of. In the next video, I'm going to show you documents from that meeting that prove the Fed was designed from the beginning to benefit banks at the expense of everyone else. I'm going to reveal how the Federal Reserve creates money that flows to asset owners first through a process most people don't understand, and I'm going to connect the dots between the rigged tax system Buffett admitted to and the rigged monetary system that makes tax policy look like a minor issue by comparison. Subscribe now if you want to see the complete picture. Because once you understand how the tax code and the Federal Reserve and the banking system work together to extract wealth from you, you'll never look at the economy the same way again. And that knowledge is the only weapon you have in a system designed to keep you ignorant and compliant while others get rich from your labor.